get built. Of course, we all mourn the streets of early Georgian terraces, which the Fruiton Wall once swept away. But no amount of wishing will bring them back. Dorset Street is gone. All that remains today is its memory. No houses, no buildings. If this scheme should go through tonight, we should compliment ourselves, objectors and supporters all, on having extracted a far better design from the developers at the end of this long, wretched process. We should agree to set aside our differences, better to deal with what lies ahead, and we should unite to bear down on the detail of this new building to be certain that within the parameters that are set, we get the very best possible outcome we can.
Thank you very much indeed.
Good evening. I'm Andy Ryder. I'm the Rector of Christchurch Spitalfields and soon to be Area Dean of Tower Hamlets. Clearly the size and the position of this development in relationship to a Grade 1 listed building that I'm trustee of for the last 9 years is of such immediate significance that I had to take a view on its development, which I did very carefully and very slowly and by attending a number of the consultation meetings. Clearly, I'm also a local resident. I live in Fournier Street, and I work based on this corner for the last 9 years. I'm also a member of the Spitalfields community group that was formerly mentioned, and I welcome this development proposal for a number of reasons which I'll just briefly outline. Firstly, previous proposals have sought to lose the whole site, and whilst I fully appreciate the need to maximise development potential, Exemplar's decision to keep the front facade means that a key part of our local history is preserved, along with a much-loved streetscape and views down Brushfield Street are conserved. The design sits in a setting which I believe complements the surrounding buildings, both new and old. Secondly, the regenerative nature of this development, providing jobs and training opportunities, is a significant local investment in both the built environment and the local employment scene. Furthermore, regenerating the car park and underused London Fruit and Wool Exchange building means that we have the opportunity to take an antisocial behaviour site and transform it to become a thriving corner of London, a mark of real socio-economic investment. Thirdly, I am deeply concerned that if the development doesn't go ahead, we will face many years before another developer can be found, and then face the same or similar issues that have been raised here this evening. Inner city development is always contentious, but inner city development is part and parcel of urban life. The plans under consideration tonight offer new public open spaces, improvements to the public realm, training and employment opportunities that are much, much needed at this time in our story of London. It provides improved access routes. This, I believe, is urban renewal, and I am pleased to hear that the GLA's officers recommend the passing of permission for this to go ahead. Lastly, I wish to state that the local consultative process that has been undertaken and has got the design into its current state is one of the best that I have seen. Along the way, the designers and developers have shown high regard for local concern and have modified the design well as a result of those conversations. I'm well under time. I could talk for longer, but I won't. Finally, I want to take you back to that image we saw, the photograph taken from the top of the steps of Christchurch Spitalfields. Yeah. It's a scene that I see regularly, midnight communion, after a bride and a groom exit the church for their wedding. At the moment, the view east down Brushfield Street is beautiful. There's an iconic Grade 1 listed building at the end. When it was restored and opened in 2004, the Evening Standard called it the best building in London. However, when you stand on those steps and you look west, the view is not so pretty. There is an underused building. There is a car park where often the sites of unsightly behaviour can be perceived by people passing. I want to stand on the top of those steps with you, members of my church, the members of our community, and look across a London that's not afraid of change. A London that it's invested in, a place which is thriving community and where jobs are provided for young and old alike, where apprenticeships and training opportunities can be provided. And I believe that this development is the best we've seen. I'm not a planner. I don't know that it could be improved, but it certainly gets my support. For far too long, we've had a site on the corner of those streets which is in desperate need of development.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that concludes the supporters' presentations. Thanks so much to all supporters who've come along tonight. Could I now hear from the developers or their agents? I think we've got 5 minutes to hear this one.
Thank you. My name is Hugh Bullock. Both the Corporation of London and the London Borough of Tower Hamlets have sought the redevelopment of this large-scale site for 10 years. As GLA officers have explained, this is a strategic development opportunity in a key location in the city fringe in the central activities zone. The new building is an excellent design by one of Britain's leading architects, selected through competition. He has been nominated for the RIBA Sterling Prize on 3 occasions and has been at the vanguard of sustainable development throughout his career. The car park causes blight and antisocial behaviour, as we've heard. London Fruit and Wool Exchange makes no contribution to street activity at present. Duval Street is a serviced road that offers no pedestrian route. The proposal has been the result of 3 years of consultation. This led firstly to the adapting and restoring of the London Fruit and Wool Exchange, and secondly to a further detailed design response in January. The result is a carefully considered, well-conceived brick and stone building drawing directly from its Spitalfields context. The restoration and adaptation of the principal facade would enhance the primary view of Hawksmoor's masterpiece of Christchurch. The proposal would create a vibrant place, including shops, cafes, restaurants and public spaces. A new footpath would run to and from the entrance to Old Spitalfields Market buildings. Scottish and Newcastle are coming back to run the new pub. The buildings that would go are not listed, even locally. At no point during the extensive consultation has there been any suggestion that any building may be of listable quality until this week. The car park is harmful. The new building would be little taller than the existing building and retains much of its grain and texture. It would respect the setting of the many exceptional and attractive buildings within the conservation area. The Borough Council has identified this site in its brief for commercial redevelopment. As a matter of principle, the proposals fulfil strategic and local land use policy for commercial redevelopment. This mixed-use proposal would provide over 35,000 square metres of office floor space, 2,000 square metres of small business space, and over 3,000 square metres of retail space. This has the potential to create 2,600 office and retail jobs, a total increase of approximately 2,300 jobs. The estimated increase in local spending would be approximately £3.1 million per annum. A most creative and comprehensive employment and training strategy has been worked up in detail with economic development officers. During construction, there would be a minimum of 75 apprenticeships, commitment to local supply chains, a minimum of 20% of construction jobs taken from local people, 20% of supplies and services to be local, job-ready training for local construction, mentoring on-site and within the area, and the hosting of a job fair. Commitments are made to creating work placements, secondary school visits and career fairs, mentoring programmes for local students, targets for local employment, and advanced notification of job opportunities. An employment and training centre would be established on-site with a start-up capital contribution. And all of this would lead to the occupiers of the building entering into a social compact managed by the Borough Council's employment and enterprise team. And as we've heard, £1 million is going into affordable housing. Borough Council officers and your officers have examined this proposal in great detail and recommended approval. All the many benefits outweigh substantially any harm. The corporation as owner and Exemplar as an experienced development partner want to commit to a very substantial capital investment now. This project has been fully thought through. We hope that you will support this exceptional proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Are we going to hear from the architect?
No, I'm not here to make a speech. I'm here to answer questions.
Okay. Right. Well, that concludes the presentations. I'm now going to fire some questions, if everybody doesn't mind. And I just, for the sake of ease, and so the whole thing doesn't get blocked up unnecessarily, I don't think people need to come to any particular point to answer these questions. I'm just going to fire them out generally in the direction of the of all sides. And I'm going to begin, I think, since we just heard from the developers and their agents, I think I'm going to begin with you guys and just try and get a bit more of a handle on the point that the council made and indeed some of the objectors from the community that there isn't any on-site housing, let alone the on-site affordable, and the point I think that Peter from the council made, that you could do something in the upstairs of the pub. Why is that so difficult?
If I could perhaps take the policy point first and let Mr. Bennett deal with the design points. And first of all, strategically, this site's unusual. It's specifically identified in the opportunity area framework for this part of London that there is an exceptional case to apply mixed-use policy. So strategically, a decision was made at London level that in looking at this site, it might be treated differently. And I think that is a product particularly of its scale and the fact that on the site already we have 20,000 square metres office space to begin with, and we look at the scale point. In terms of how the site is then made up, the key driver is the north-south divide of the new space, how that opens the site, as it were, to a west element and to an east element.
You've got a stocky amount of space there. I mean, you could do a very big floor plate or plan or whatever for office stuff without forfeiting the ability to have some residential, couldn't you?
Brad, do you want us to explain in more detail?
Yes, I could. I think it would be a very different scheme if that was the case. I mean, there are very significant detailed points to be taken on board with housing, like access, separate lift cores, separate entrances, and of course that gets doubled when it's affordable, when it's private, and so on. So it would be a very different layout indeed. When it comes to the residential above the pub, I'd like, if I could, to go back to the reasons for facade being retained, because it's a much bigger issue than just that on its own. So if I can do that just for a moment, I'd like to. I mean, I think it's already been mentioned by, I think, Mr. Sinden, that there were proposals early on which examined all kinds of developments on the site, and it was pretty early on that we took the decision that we could keep the facade of the London Fruit and Wood Exchange. And that allowed us to do two things. One was to enhance that facade, because it had been butchered in the 1960s, and we could put it back to its original condition, which is quite handsome. And the second, which was more or less a condition of keeping the facade, is we could then design an entire building based around that facade so that it did not suffer from that facadist tendency you sometimes get, where a facade is just left in isolation and the building bears no relation to it. So we actually designed a building entirely around it with an axis of symmetry through the middle, right through the centre of the portico of the existing London Fruit and Wood Exchange, handed it on both sides with atrium spaces, lift and stair cores and all the rest of it. And so that provided a certain type of floor plate, which is compatible, in my view, with the retention of such a big and imposing, important facade. So we have made a link between the inside of the building and its perimeter. It's not a piece of facadism, it's much deeper than that. Now then, if you keep the volumes of corner buildings as well, it makes a mockery of that policy, because it takes a big lump out of each corner of the building at opposite ends, right at the point where you're getting close to cores and atrium spaces.
You mean you see, so if you've got the permeability through, which you with the jinky little alley thing, then you lose too much space if you then also have...
Well, it's certainly a loss of space, but it also makes the floors upstairs almost unusable in those parts of the floors.
I mean, the configuration becomes
very constrained. So we thought we could not keep the entire volume of the corner buildings, and so we then considered, could you keep the facade only of the corner buildings? And that's when you hit these issues of floor plates not lining through, with floor slabs going across windows and so on. So it's an extremely uncomfortable fit in every respect. And if those buildings had been of a higher quality, that might have been a discussion worth having. Maybe they would have taken precedence over the Fruit and Wood, but they're not of high quality. And we felt, in the end, a modern building would be better in those corridors. And, of course, it resolves the problem of how to make a building work behind such a big and imposing existing facade.
Okay, I've got you. Just so secondly, on the Jinky Alley, I'm calling it. What's the role? How do you describe it?
It's just a pedestrian route through the middle.
A pedestrian route through the middle. It's not going to have a more glamorous title at any stage.
We'll think of it.
Is there some, in architecture, is there some swanky word for a jinky little alley?
You could call it an arcade.
An arcade? Well, it's an arcade. And is it a covered arcade?
It's covered where you enter and leave, but it's open in the middle.
It's open in the middle. And will it be completely open to everybody? There'll be no question of it being shut at night or anything like that?
The proposal is to leave it open 24/7, but there have been lots of consultation views on that. And in discussion with Tower Hamlets, the preferred option was to leave it open. And it was a managed space because it's an occupied building, so there will be people in that building managing the space all the time.
The G4S.
And of course, there is an option, which is